Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of Burley's World. Wanted to continue with a little bit more information from my last video and give you a little bit more insight into one of the things I was talking about, which was making mistakes. And I've certainly made them in life, in relationships, in business, without a doubt. We all have, but some are more painful than others. And I have said for probably 30 years, it's cheaper to learn from other people's mistakes when you can than to learn from your own. Now, they may not be quite as indelible in your brain, but they are definitely less expensive. If you see someone do something in their business and it completely turns things upside down for them and things do not go well, you can avoid that pitfall by just observing and watching. And I've done a lot of that over the last 30 years, is observing people in different businesses and just trying to be aware of what other people are doing. And does that action in their business have any crossover into anything that I'm doing? Can I apply it in some way? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's so far removed it doesn't really relate. But sometimes it does. Sometimes you can take that situation and transfer it into whatever you're involved in or wanting to be involved in, and you can avoid some of the pitfalls of people that have gone before you. So when you can, observe, apply, and do better. The other thing I was going to tell you about was I had mentioned that I had certainly made some mistakes in real estate. I can go into a little bit of that today, and hopefully you can avoid some of those pitfalls for free. It won't cost you anything like it did me. When the real estate market was real good in, say, '05 or so, tail end of '06, things began to change a little bit. I live in Oregon, and so it was kind of an odd phenomenon. This drop in values and this crash that occurred with a lot of delinquent payments, property owners, foreclosures. It really hadn't hit us in Oregon or on the West Coast so much, and it almost seemed like the property troubles were happening in the Midwest, on the East Coast, and they weren't really affecting us over here. And they really didn't for about a year. It seemed like it took over a year for everything to kind of travel back over this way. And it started hitting us in mid '07 and in '08 big time. But in '06, '07, first part of '07, we weren't really seeing any of that. And so we meaning me and some friends, other fellow investors, several of us thought it was sort of an isolated scenario, like we were somehow insulated from what was going on there, and we continued to invest. I was buying my triplexes, the ones that I'm currently selling right now. I was buying them in '07, and I had not even realized how bad things had gotten until in the process of buying those triplexes, I was waiting for the title company to let me know that things had closed. A week went by, another week went by, nothing had happened. So I called the title company and they said, whoa, you're right, we haven't heard anything. Let me check and get back to you. And a few minutes later, I get a phone call and they tell me that they got an email back that said Countrywide was no longer servicing loans. Now, Countrywide had already agreed to make the loan, but they basically were cutting their losses. They were deep underwater, and they were basically going bankrupt. And Bank of America ended up buying them, swallowing their debt and continuing on. But here I was in the middle of trying to close a property, and the bank that had agreed to fund those loans was just backing out. So I had to scramble, go to another bank, ended up being with Wells Fargo, and they were able to make the loan happen. But that was just the beginning of me starting to realize that things weren't going so well. And then that followed with property values that began to tumble. And so here I was with triplexes that I had bought for $250,000 a piece, and suddenly over the next couple of years they're now worth $160,000, $170,000 a piece. So what have I done? Here we are with this tumbling value. I certainly can't sell them at this point, or I'll be selling them at a pretty good loss. So it was a hold on to them and do the best you can and hope that things recover. We always thought that they would. We just didn't know how long it would be, and no one thought it would take 10 or 12 years to recover. During that same time, that time that we thought we were insulated, something that happened a little bit before I had purchased those triplexes is I saw some extremely inexpensive properties in the Midwest. And I had a pretty good year in my construction business, and I was taking some time off and was actually spending some time with my dad and helping him with some health problems that he had. And so I had taken about a month off, and with all that idle time, I started to get a little antsy. And as I start seeing these properties for sale, I couldn't believe the prices. I ended up buying, 3-bedroom homes for $10,000 that didn't need that much work to get them rented. And I thought, how in the world can you go wrong with properties like that? I mean, of course, the rents are going to be lower, maybe $350 to $400 a month, but that's a great return on a $10,000 or $12,000 investment. So I thought, how in the world can you go wrong? Well, I bought a bunch, and then I found out exactly how things can go wrong. And so that's what I wanted to cover with you guys today, is just give you a few tips on how things can go wrong, and maybe you can transfer that to whatever situation you're in or might be entering in the future. Now, one of the things I didn't know was I didn't know the areas out there. I didn't know much about Michigan or Ohio. I'd never been in those states in my life. And so I thought, well, how can you go wrong? So I scrambled. I found some property management companies, and I found some people to do some maintenance on them and get these properties up and running. But I had no idea how bad the economy really was out there, and how troublesome some of the renters or the renter pool would be out there. And the other thing I had no idea was the neighborhoods that I was buying these properties in were really terrible properties. Some of them were, there was a street, where there was 5 out of the 10 houses were burnt up, and it was extremely depressed and low income neighborhood, and really not very many people would even want to live there. And so that did two things. One, it dropped the rent. Just to get somebody in there, the rent had to be extremely low. And then that low rent also attracted the kind of people that you really don't want as renters. Those are the same people that probably aren't going to pay the next month, but over there, it would take 3 months to get them out. And so in the meantime, they would do damage. We would get them out. After 4 months, I'd have 1 month's rent and, $1,500 worth of damage. So I was going backwards every time I would put a renter in there. And I would get a renter in there maybe 3 times a year for a month, and it would just cost me. The other thing that was oddball, I had never seen anything like this before. It was the property tax level in comparison to the value of the property. Now, when all of those property values dropped, the tax rates stayed the same. The city still wanted to get the same taxes, and so I don't know exactly how they adjusted, but they never went down for me. But the funny thing is within about 5 years of owning those properties, I get a little postcard in the mail about my property taxes and my property value. And a property that I had bought for $10,000, a 3-bedroom house for $10,000, was now worth $5,000. And I just started to laugh because how in the world you can't buy land for that? And the funniest thing was my tax bill for the year was $2,500 on a property that was worth $5,000. It's 50% tax rate on your value. I was astounded, and I just had to laugh because it was so ridiculous. Well, in the end, these properties, they were really hard to keep going. The taxes were high. I wasn't making money. And I had leveraged some of my other properties here in Oregon in order to buy these. And so I had leveraged about $200,000 to buy these properties. And I had about 25 units out there. And in the end, I ended up giving them back to the county because it was costing me so much to keep them. I was basically financially bleeding out there. It was an amazing scenario. Again, when I say I thought there was how in the world do you lose money in a scenario like that? I found out. And so that definitely added a new piece of information that I didn't know the area. I didn't know the scenarios that were going on in the area. Completely unfamiliar with an area. And if you ever buy in an area you're not from, make sure you have someone in your court, someone who's going to bat for you, not just for them, not like a realtor that only has their interest at heart, but someone who knows the area, will put you in a good area, and will advise you wisely so that it doesn't put you in a similar situation. I didn't have that advantage, and honestly, things had gone okay enough here in Oregon for me that I guess I got a little cocky, really, because I was able to buy a property. I would hunt for a property. I would buy it for undervalue. I tried to get, something about 20% under the going rate, the market rate. And so I would buy a property with equity in it already. I would fix it up, create more equity, and then if I ever needed to sell it right away, there was actually money in there. It also made it much easier to pull money out of later if you basically are buying it with equity in it. And so I do think I got a little cocky and thought, well, I've done really well on deals before. I'll do well over here in the Midwest too, and maybe I'll do even better. Again, I didn't know the market. I didn't know the area. I wasn't familiar with what was really going on there. I needed the real story. And so if you ever invest out of state, have somebody in your court that's really going to bat for you. I hope this helped you. I probably lost $250,000 out there in the Midwest, and some of it I'm still paying for. And so here we are 12 years later, and believe me, every month I am reminded, because I've got payments on leveraged loans on things I did out there. And so that is an indelible mistake for me, and I won't ever forget that. I hope these tips helped you. I will be back with another installment in this series and in for other topics as well. And we look forward to talking with you soon. Have a great day.